Hi, I'm Jacob Brown, and I'm a couples therapist in Sausalito, California. And I want to welcome you to Sex, Love, and Couples Therapy. Today, we're going to look at what sounds like kind of a simple question, but is actually, I think, pretty complex, which is what does it mean to be emotionally vulnerable? Couples are having this discussion all the time. I want you to be more vulnerable with me. Why can't you be more vulnerable? Why are you so defensive? So today, we're going to try to figure out what does it mean to be vulnerable? Let's go take a look. So let's start by looking at the word vulnerable itself. It turns out the word vulnerable comes from the Latin word vulnerabilis. Please excuse the pronunciation, have no clue. But what's really interesting about that word is what it means. It translates as able to be wounded. And let's just take a second to think about that. Able to be wounded. I think that's the most perfect definition of what being emotionally vulnerable is. Because when I'm vulnerable, I kind of open myself up to the possibility that I'm going to be wounded, I'm going to be hurt, or I'm going to disappoint my partner, I'm going to make them sad, I'm going to make them angry. But someone's going to get hurt. So when I make myself vulnerable, I give the world the opportunity to wound me. So what's the opposite of being vulnerable? Well, I think the opposite of being vulnerable is being defensive. And when I think of that word defensive, I think of someone who's defended. They're behind the wall. They're in the fort, behind the wall, protected, defended. But also in that image of them behind the wall, they're also kind of isolated, maybe alone, not connected. So it feels like there's these two options. I'm either open to harm, but feeling connected, or I'm safe from harm, but I'm alone. And that's sometimes the way it feels to people when they start talking or thinking about being vulnerable. But really, it's not like it's all vulnerable or all defensive. It's a continuum like anything else. And what you have to do, or what we are each striving to do, is to find the right place on that continuum for us between all vulnerable and all defensive. What's the right place where we feel comfortable, where we feel ourselves? But also, what's the right place for my relationship? Because the relationship has a need for vulnerability as well. So when you think of it that way, no wonder it gets kind of confusing. Because as human beings, we have two core needs. One need is to feel connected. We deeply want to feel connected, a part of, a member of the tribe. That's really an important part of who we are as humans. At the same time, we are born with a built-in drive to keep ourselves safe. So when I think about a relationship in which there's both this need to be connected and a desire to be connected, but also sometimes the relationship may not feel completely safe, well, that's very hard to navigate. I've got to figure out a place that works both for me and for the relationship while I'm balancing these two often competing, you know, urges or needs. I want to be connected, but I also want to be safe. So that really gives you a sense of what might be happening inside you as you try to navigate this yourself and with your partner. And while we're born knowing how to take action to protect ourselves, and we're born with a drive to be connected, we're not really born knowing how to become connected. That is something we have to learn. And while the protective reaction is immediate and intense and innate, we have to actually learn how to lower that guard and be open enough to connect. The desire to connect, absolutely built in, but learning how to connect, that takes some time. And the way I look at it, that opening up to connect is actually a conscious decision. I have to be able to lay down some of my fears in order to open up, make myself available to be harmed, able to be wounded in order to make the connection. That's not so easy. So how do we learn to become vulnerable? The first place we learn how to become vulnerable is in our families. And some of us are very lucky and we're born into very stable, loving households where expressing our needs and our feelings is really welcomed. People listen to us, they respond to us in a way that makes it clear that they're hearing us, that they're trying to kind of match us. And that's an environment in which learning to become vulnerable is kind of a natural process because other people are being vulnerable with us, and when we are vulnerable with them, it's met with acceptance and love. But many of us aren't lucky enough to be born into those kind of stable, loving households. It's just the reality of life. Many of us instead are born into unstable, chaotic, dangerous households where we quickly learn that if we share our feelings, they're going to get used against us or we're going to be ridiculed for them. And so we quickly learn lessons that teach us to keep those kind of more sensitive feelings and emotions inside. Because if we let them out, they're not going to be received well. But most of us don't grow up in any of those extremes. We grow up in households which are a little bit of everything. They're very loving and stable sometimes, but sometimes they can be a little chaotic and difficult. They're very trustworthy sometimes, and then every once in a while somebody will betray the trust. So that's the more typical experience, but still, it's difficult to learn the lessons of the benefits of vulnerability when you're in an environment which doesn't reward it or rewards it sometimes, but and other times punishes it. It's a very confusing message, especially if you're a child. I mean, it's very unclear. What am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to be trusting or am I supposed to be the opposite? Defensive, hidden, keeping things hidden, managing it on my own because if I put it out there, it's going to be trouble. Well, then as we grow up and we begin to get into serious love relationships, romantic relationships, well, we don't come to those as a blank slate when it comes to defensiveness versus vulnerability. We bring ourselves to this and all the experiences that we've had before. So we come to these relationships already with an attitude or a predisposition or a feeling towards what it means to be vulnerable, what it means to be protective. Do we think our goal is to be open and honest with our partner? Or do we think our goal is to keep a few things hidden, to manage their impression of us? Do we feel like we have to give them our best impression or else they're going to leave us? And so we are constantly curating the narrative so that we look okay. But that also means that we're hiding certain parts of who we are and that they're not coming into the relationship. And we bring these attitudes and feelings and habits about vulnerability with us to each of these relationships. And these patterns persist no matter who we're in a relationship with until we change the patterns in ourselves. It's not our partner who drives our vulnerability. It's our attitudes and our experiences. So if we're going to change that pattern of how we are in a relationship, we have to change ourselves. But we all know people who keep looking for happiness in a different partner because they can't see how they contribute to what's happening in the relationship, how their attitudes contribute to the problems. And so they just think, oh, this is the wrong person. I need another person. And that can go on for a long time until suddenly you figure out, oh, I got to change, not just them. Many people come to a relationship very uncomfortable with the idea of being vulnerable. And they bring to the relationship a question which is often not kind of addressed directly. And that question is basically, what's the point? What's the point of all this vulnerability and all this sharing of all this, making myself open to being wounded? Why bother? Why don't we just kind of get things done and move forward in the relationship, maybe raise the kids and do all the things we have to do? What's the point of kind of to trying constantly to be open and communicating and and vulnerable. What's the point? I think it's an important question to really consider. What is the value here? Why should I bother? When I think about that question of why bother, I think about it in terms of the way people talk about business and risk versus reward. And we realize the risk. The risk is that you're going to be hurt. The risk is that you're going to open that part of you, make yourself vulnerable to your partner, and they're going to disappoint you. They're going to hurt you. And that's not really a risk. That's a certainty. That is definitely going to happen because we're just people. We're fallible. We make mistakes. We have our own fears and issues. And I guarantee you that at some point, your partner will let you down and you'll be hurt. So that's the risk. So what's the reward? Well, the reward is a level of connection that you don't get without the vulnerability. Now, I've seen many, many couples who are absolutely connected. They, they're married, they have kids, they manage to raise the kids and take care of the house and remodel the house and travel and do all the parts of life. But they do those feeling not deeply emotionally connected. And what happens is each of them feels slightly lonely. They feel on some level as if they're in it on their own. They don't feel in a true partnership. And often that comes out when they talk about feeling unseen or unheard, that it's all on them. And that's the real risk. The risk isn't so much that you'll be hurt. The risk is that you'll be alone. And the only solution for that loneliness in a marriage is vulnerability and connection. And as far as I know, the only path to a deeper, more meaningful connection is by sharing vulnerably with each other, by both people making themselves available to be harmed, to be wounded. It's a dangerous, difficult path, but the reward at the end of the path is feeling truly connected and loved in a way that you can't feel cared for and loved without that level of vulnerability. Now, as you remember at the beginning, I said it's not just all vulnerability or all defensiveness. It's a continuum. Not every relationship has to be intensely vulnerable or intensely defensive. You have to find a place where you can be with your partner, where you can meet your partner where he or she is and feel truly met on your own side. So to me, this question of why bother is actually a deeply existential question. And by that I mean it's a question about how we want to live, how we want to exist. How much do we want to live in deep connection, and how much do we want to live on our own? And answering that question is a very important process for each of us as individuals to find out who we truly are and how we want to live our lives. And at what level of vulnerability or defensiveness we feel is right for us, given who we are, what our experiences have been, where we've been, what our family has been. Where do you want to be? That's the question to ask yourself. Where do you want to be? And finding a way and a partner that you can genuinely and completely and honestly show up for that kind of a relationship. That's the key, because vulnerability is all about showing up honestly as yourself. That's the goal. Well, I hope you found this interesting. It's a topic that I think about a lot, and it's a topic that comes up a lot as a therapist, where I'm helping clients to kind of think about this question of the balance between defensiveness and vulnerability and find a place where they can feel deeply connected. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you today. I'm Jacob Brown, and I look forward to seeing you again. Take care.